Rajesh and our colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Let me first congratulate Chintaji and the team for organizing this event. It's a very welcome thing, and media has an important role. I don't have to articulate on that. And many issues happen on the tiger front. It's never a dull moment. I don't have a structured presentation for the present. So during this session, I simply articulate, add something more or complement what Sunitaji has spoken already at length. And then perhaps maybe in the afternoon, when there's a slot for me, a structured presentation, I can supplement and say something more on tiger-related issues, especially the counting part. Now, we have the backbone of wildlife conservation as far as our country is concerned is the Wildlife Protection Act. Prior to that also we have been having many legislations, but in 1972 a central legislation, a national legislation in the form of Wildlife Protection Act was adopted by all the states and union territories except the state of J&K. They have later subsequently crafted a similar act, and that is in place. Then of course we have the Indian Forest Act, we have the Forest Conservation Act. Indian Forest Act is very old, 1927. Then we have the Forest Conservation Act of 1980, where you can't do any diversion of forest land unless you get a proper clearance. And then you have the Environment Protection Act, so many acts, in the Biodiversity Act, lot of legislations we have. And all these are important in the context of wildlife conservation. We have roughly say 4.8% of total geographical area, country's geographical area in the form of parks and sanctuaries. And roughly about 1% of country's area, you can say, that is 41 out of these 661 protected areas have been designated as tiger reserves. Now, Sunitaji articulated at length about the Tiger Task Force. Yes, we have been having this tiger conservation program ongoing as a scheme since 1972. The oldest amongst all the tiger range countries, India has the track record of having taken this step way back in the early 70s, starting with 9 reserves, now 41 reserves, and spread out in 17 states, amounting to the 4 areas amount to 1%. But the Tiger Task Force really changed the whole thing. I mean, gave a new impetus and strengthened the whole scheme of things. And it evolved from a simple fund-releasing scheme to an authority. And the Act was amended in 2006 based on the Tiger Task Force recommendations to implement its urgent recommendations. And it was a very tough job. It took us almost a year going to the Law Ministry, passing first the committees, and then all the rigorous due diligence which is required for passing an act was done, and in record time we could get this, a separate chapter on tigers. Now, definitely this is a changed thing, you know, as Sunita said, a paradigm shift you can say, and it gives us the roadmap to move ahead. So what we have been doing in the past, all of us know, aggressive, exclusive agenda as far as tiger or any wildlife management is concerned, and that needs to be done and continued in those core areas even now. But with the recommendations of the Tiger Task Force, a new roadmap is there for us to implement, that is an equally aggressive, inclusive agenda in the peripheral or the buffer areas. Now, out of these 41 tiger reserves, 25 already have a notified buffer. Now, buffer used to be spoken in common parlance in those days. You see, I have been associated with this since 1981 with this tiger, Project Tiger, and all these things in the center, and in the state agenda in the center. So there was no legal sanctity for a buffer. And you see, wildlife conservation is a collective responsibility. It's not that sitting in Delhi, I say something or our minister says something and everyone does it. It's not like that. The land belongs to the state. So it's a collective responsibility between three key players. The central government, because of the 42nd Amendment, you have this on the concurrent list. Then the state governments, because they own the land, land is a state subject, and then the civil society institutions. They have playing a very active role. They have already played a good role and keeping the focus on. So it's between the central government, state government, and civil society institutions. You have this wildlife being conserved in the country. Now we in India, we don't have private tiger reserves or private national parks and sanctuaries. It's all state-owned. Wherever you have private forests, you have several private forests in, say, for example, Sindhudurg, Ratnagiri, Maharashtra, Northeast, you have the deep forest in Kerala. All these have some kind of protection. You can't deforest those areas. I mean, there is overarching legislation to protect them. You need, of course, the nod of the Supreme Court now. Now, all those legislations which I spoke, plus the Honorable Apex Court's directive statement again on the subject, its interpretation of forest cover, all these are overarching on us. How do we implement, how do we conserve our forests, how do we save our wildlife? Now, exclusive and inclusive agenda I spoke about that. As Sunita ji also articulated at length, we need the exclusive thing in the core because of the fact a viable tiger population based on empirical data, scientific data, it has been found that something like 800 to 1200 square kilometer of inviolate space you require for a viable population of tiger. You may ask what's a viable population. We have said it's 20 breeding tigresses. So given the sex ratio of 1:2 skewing towards female, for every male 2 tigresses or little more than 2, this small group of 20 with its spatial dynamics of advertising and showing its presence will be supporting something like 65 to 70 animals in the area. Some transient, some waiting in the wings to occupy the territory, some old ones which have been thrown out, and yet looking for some areas to come back inside into high density areas. So like this, encumbered tigresses, non-encumbered tigresses, young cubs, all these put together something like 65 to 70 animals normally we have seen is found in an area where you have successfully managed to save some 20 breeding tigresses. This requires an equal amount of buffer area. You see, we have an exclusive agenda for the core, but in buffer, mind you, an aggressive, inclusive agenda has been prescribed. Now we are trying to implement it. Now, what is inclusive? As we said, it's very difficult to define. The broad thing is, the most important thing rather is, the people should benefit out of this. Every tiger conserved means something the local community should get out of it. They should see something they are gaining from in saving a tiger, and not merely people coming and clicking and taking the photographs and they get nothing out of it. So that is in a nutshell our strategy of saving the tigers, protection, consolidating the habitat, establishing the inviolate space in the core area, having an inclusive agenda in the buffer. See, buffer forests are also important from the tiger context. Tigers, as far as tigers are concerned, if you see the life cycle, there is a source, there is a sink. There are two kinds of populations. One is in the source area, that is what we call as the core area, where you have exclusive things done for tigers. They have their territory, they advertise and they guard, and then there are overlaps, areas of stress, so on and so forth. But then you need some patchy forests. Why patchy? If the good forests are there, so much the better. You need some forests outside also, so which you call as the sink forests, or the sink populations should be supported there. And there has to be a flow, a movement from the sink area to source and source area to sink. And these sink areas, I have a slide in the afternoon, time permits, I'll show you this. And the sink areas have to be in touch with other such contiguous forest areas, and they in turn should be contiguous to other source areas. Likewise, the gene flow can happen, may happen, and this is what we call as the corridor concept, the connectivity. Kind of ecologically unsustainable land use patterns. You have industries, mining, you have so many things, you have development programs of the state, you have small cities, you have big cities, and you have lands, so many land uses, and you have temples, people flock together, thousands, hundreds and thousands of people come to such temples, they have the habitat, so many things are there. The challenge is to save tiger in this vast sea of human kind. Mind you, we have 14% of our cattle, equal percentage of human beings in this country, plus we have the challenge of saving the tigers. India has a number of tiger sites and the tiger population of the 38 countries. We have largely Asiatic elephants, the only last stronghold of Asiatic lions. Then we have quite a few endangered species like snow leopard, you have the marasingas, you have so many endangered animals. So the challenge is always there, and the overarching thing is conservation should benefit people, and that is what is important to save the tigers or any wild animal. So under Project Tiger, the piece of information I will share with you, we generate something like, we computed, we found that we generate in saving tigers, something like 25 lakh mandates are generated. Where the local people are involved. How they are involved? They are involved in the form of local workforce. You see, there is a problem of staff shortage. So the local people come there and work, employed on contractual basis. This is also a thing which the Tiger Task Force supports and emphasizes. It gives a lot of strength to push the agenda because many states, for example, they have a policy not to have local people because the contractual system has been followed by the objective by the local. But this is a problem. If the local people don't get anything even during the leave period, and then you are paying police to people from elsewhere, then you can't save tigers. So we are telling the planning commission and also the task and government, please change your policy, go to the court again. Tell them you need these local people to protect these animals. You see, they parallel the area. Many of them are he's here. My colleague who was with me for 7 years and he has more experience than 15 or 18 years of managing these areas. So so many people are deployed per day in these types of wild states or states like Rajasthan where they have a legal problem. Now, 25 lakh mandates Project Tiger generates, and the support goes 50% from the center for doing this, 50% from the state. Under the Project Tiger, have a question, how much has been spent so far? From 72, if you go to the level plan, only 20 crores have been spent. So you have large action schemes in the country where investment has been much. But during the level, after the level plan, after the level plan, during the level plan, we could, because of the Tiger Task Force and the prescriptions we got for the mandate we got for involving the people, we prevailed, we succeeded in stepping up, making a step up allocation of 60 crores. So up to these time periods, up to the count is on now, up to the level, 950 crores for the allocation for Project Tiger. So we have around 760 villages and 48,500 people areas. And there is no mandate, no compulsion, or no overarching thing, no technological requirement. We are not going to forcefully relocate anybody. That is there in the act. So the areas are identified as per Wildlife Protection Act. It's a thing which has been done prior to the Development Act, and now the Development Act led with the Wildlife Protection Act has to be taken together for implementing the application or for creating a wildlife. Both things have to be regulated, guidelines have been issued, and several committees are there to oversee all this. We have interested several organizations. So far, how many people we have relocated? 80 was the figure, number of villages we said in 2005. Now 115, I think 100, no 105, not 150. No, it was 80 plus 100. It's a very difficult task, and there are two options in this. And then now